Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ryan Gable. First, I have a couple of announcements. You can now get Forbidden Knowledge News live 5 days a week on Rumble, Rokfin, and our website. And you can also download your limited edition version of Episode 1 of the Forbidden documentary series right from our website, or click the link in the description. Our website, again, is forbiddenknowledge.news. This is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. We feature some amazing podcasts there as well. You can always get every new episode of Forbidden Knowledge News on Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Sign up on Rokfin. Rokfin is where you get our premium content. It's a great way to support us. And the best part is you get all the premium content from every amazing creator on Rokfin. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+, or use the link right in the description. Today I want to welcome back to the show Ryan Gable. He is a veteran radio personality and producer for his weeknight show, The Secret Teachings, and a special weekend show called TST Weekends. His broadcasts focus on the synchronicity and objective analysis of parapsychology, pop conspiracy, parapolitics, health, history, the paranormal, symbolism, the occult and esoteric, alchemy, magic, philosophy, and more in the most distinct ways by finding parallels and patterns often overlooked. Ryan, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back. We got video this time.
Yes,
it's
excellent.
Even better than last time.
The audience loves to see your beautiful face. Man, this is great. Today we're going to get into some esoteric media symbolism, current events that may hold much deeper significance than appears on the surface. And you've been decoding this symbolism and these high-impact events for a very long time, and there's really never a shortage of them to discuss. And you have a new book we're going to weave in a little bit to this discussion. Before we get to any of that, for those that may not be familiar, could you let the audience know a little bit about yourself and your content?
Yeah, of course. So my show is called The Secret Teachings. It's named after a book by Manly Palmer Hall called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And that book focuses on everything from what we might call occultism to things that might even dabble in the paranormal, but it's written from a very scholarly point of view. And that's the way that I pick up those related subjects on my radio show, The Secret Teachings, and in all of the books I've written. I try to take an approach that is scholarly. And going back to what you just said a second ago about how, I kind of break down into code things that are happening in the world. I don't like that to be associated with the TikTok videos and the Instagram posts and the memes and the things of, everything is proof of conspiracy. A Dorito is the Illuminati. I find that stuff to be ludicrous and egregious and ridiculous, and I find it to actually be kind of it makes it more difficult for me to do my job, which is basically just observing. And it doesn't make I want to preface too. I want to say that this doesn't make me special. I don't have secret information that nobody else has. My show's The Secret Teachings, but that's not what it references or means. So in a nutshell, that is what my show is named after. And I think the best example of what I do and what my background is I like to take mythology and archetypes, and I like to see how they apply to current events. I like to take history and see how it applies to the present, and then, of course, grouping all that together and seeing where we're headed in the future.
Excellent, excellent. Great introduction. Now, before we get into our discussion today, you mentioned something that I would like to get your further insights into, and that is the current muddying of the conspiratorial waters or the infiltration of the truth community. Throughout our history, anything that we've considered good or truthful has unfortunately been co-opted or infiltrated in some way. Whether it's intentional by accident, whether there are folks at higher levels trying to destroy certain movements or get them going in a certain direction, or it's just individuals that want their own 5 minutes of fame or to stir up the narrative themselves in some way, we get a lot of bad information. And now with the age of social media and TikTok and everything like we were just discussing before the show, it gets hard. It gets hard to decipher some of the information that's coming through. And I think that it's become more intentional as of late, as more people seem to be awakening to these things and becoming more aware that there is a deception. But the problem is that there are too many people that don't do their due diligence when it comes to research, or they just want to get out there to muddy the waters. And it causes a huge problems for folks like yourself and myself and people that come on my show who really did work to try and find out what's going on. And that's a huge problem right now. And I don't see that getting any better anytime soon.
No, I actually just did a show on this on the Secret Teachings with Ryder Lee from Raised by Giants. We had a good conversation about this, and he talked a lot about various UFO cults and how today the UFO community is basically recycling a lot of the talking points from those UFO cults, a lot of the same ideologies. And then, of course, I don't know if a lot of your listeners, I don't know if they listen to my show, but if you haven't, you go back and listen to that show. It's in the archive at thesecretteachings.info. I was discussing, from my point of view, my experience in the UFO community, but also one of the popular UFO documentaries, Mirage Men, which is a very well documented history of infiltration of UFO groups. I think in my opinion, the best way to explain this and to sort of break it down into digestible bits is I look at the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, 1918 in Russia. And when the communists took over Russia, they overthrew the Tsar. Sometime in the early to mid 20s, they had this campaign. It was a counterintelligence campaign called Operation Trust, and that operation was intended. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so Operation Trust was intended, for anybody who doesn't know, it was intended to basically find anybody who was a political dissident, anybody who was an opponent of the Communist Party or the Communist State, even people that were more moderate. And about 30 years and change later, in Communist China, Mao Zedong did something very similar. It was called the 100 Flowers campaign. And they encouraged people to write letters and tell the government what they thought of how the country was being run. And people were actually skeptical at first, but Mao and the party said, no, it's okay. You can tell us what you think. People told them what they thought, and then they disappeared. And something very similar has happened in the last, I'd say, 10 years to make sure we get the ends of this. But in the last probably 5 to 8 years, especially with QAnon, which the whole hashtag of that, the whole talking point slogan of that was trust the plan. Yes. I call it Operation Trust the Plan. And I'm not politically minded per se. I guess you could call me a conventional, traditional constitutionalist. But when it comes to the issue of politics, and I'm not even sure what you think or feel about this, but whether it's the political left or the political right, I mean, most major movements they're cults.
Yes.
Ufology is a cult. I like some of the things that Donald Trump did as president, but the MAGA movement is a cult.
Yes.
The abortion issue is a cult of people that just want abortion's the only thing that matters. And I think so much, I mean, it doesn't matter, again, if it's abortion or if it's UFOs. So much is based on conjecture. It's based on not questioning and simply believing whatever the party tells you, whether that's the Communist Party or that's the Planned Parenthood Party or that's the ufologist, con men, UFO monopoly party.
Yes.
And so when you start to dig deeper, I mean, we don't need to talk about abortion, but like abortion's a really great example because it's such a hot topic. If you actually look at the laws prior to Roe versus Wade getting overturned in conservative states, it was a lot more difficult or a lot more easy to get an abortion than people thought. And in liberal states, it was a lot more difficult to get an abortion than people thought. Supreme Court decisions, and we can apply this understanding to UFOs and to the paranormal, to anything. Supreme Court decisions aren't black and white discussions where it's like yes and no. They're like hundreds and hundreds of pages of the court's opinion and then the dissenting opinions of the other judges. And I use that as an example because when we look at UFOs, when we look at symbolism, when we look at conspiracies, it's kind of like that. They're not simple yes or no things. They're complex. If they were written out, they would be hundreds and maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of pages of analysis of why some events that we see, things in the sky, are not alien space ships. Most of them are not. I'd assume 99.99% are not. There's always that possibility, I suppose. But the point is, it's more detailed. It's more complex. It's not a simple yes or no. And I think we have to be really careful no matter what we're interested in, even if it's mainstream stuff, because everything seems to be reduced in the mainstream and the alternative to simple black and white issues, lots of conjecture and lots of fallacy.
100%. And right now we have the cult of government working with the cult of ufology together because of the new revelations that have been coming from daddy government and the Pentagon. So it's okay now to discuss these things, but we're still not going to get any tangible evidence of any of this. And we have to blindly put faith and blindly believe in what our leaders are telling us about UFOs and the possibilities of extraterrestrial life. So we've got a double whammy when it comes to the cult situation, a triple whammy, a quadruple, because we're surrounded by just cult activity right now. And it's all a matter of, do you want to join some kind of egotistical leader that is only trying to lead you in a direction because it feeds their own ego and the agendas of those above them? Or do you just want to live your life? So we're in interesting times right now, for sure.
And I think we're always in interesting times, especially if you pay attention.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I think this is the thing that you can build like an understanding of the occult and symbolism and archetypes and all that. You can build that from the ground up. And I say the ground up, I'm referencing like politics, like something that people are involved in every day, arguing about, debating about. Again, I'm not saying political parties are cults. I'm saying that movements are cults.
Yeah.
And like I agree. I like the idea of make America great, but it's a slogan. And America is already great compared to a lot of countries in the world. And Americans don't have any perspective on that. It's a slogan. No more malarkey, whatever that was supposed to mean from Joe Biden. It's a slogan. It doesn't, they don't have any meaning outside of the immediate context of the group and the group identity. And it's group identity politics that drove communist China, that drove the Soviet Union, and it's driving what we call liberal democracies in the world too, group, collective, hive mind identities. And that also, I feel, is, and actually I know, that is also something that I don't know if a lot of folks recognize the similarity between the political and ideological cults and techno cults or technology cults, in the sense that we're waiting for someone to take a wire and plug it into our head, and then we're all connected to the Ray Kurzweil, Google, CIA hive mind. Nobody needs to plug anything into your head. You don't need to be in the Matrix movie being plugged in on the Nebuchadnezzar. You get plugged into that when you use social media. You get plugged into that when you believe in the hive mind collective ideology of political movements or alternative movements, etc. That's the hive mind. And when you start to recognize that kind of stuff, if you pay attention to archetypes, mythology, symbols, I want to give you a really great example. It's something that I never went looking for. It's just something I noticed because my personal interest is I love mythology and I love symbolism and I love, the history of magic and what all those things mean. And my favorite myth, I'd say one of my favorite myths, probably top 3, is the myth of Osiris and Horus and Isis, the Trinity of Egypt. It's a very popular myth. I don't know how many people actually know about the details. But in that myth, Osiris, who's a green god of agriculture, like the Green Man, he is put into a golden coffin, and that coffin is placed on the Nile River. To simplify this story, Osiris is also known as a black god because black soil is very, very important, fertile soil, especially in a desert. The Nile River would overflow once a year, and that would make the soil very fertile, and they would be able to plant and grow things there. So he was also known as a black god. A black and green god both relate to agriculture. So in other words, you had a black god put into a golden coffin, and then he's placed onto the Nile River. It's a metaphor. The coffin represents the physical body. Osiris is consciousness or spirit, which is why you see Osiris bound up like a mummy, and then you see his head protruding from the mummy wrappings. That is the spirit. That is the 5th point of the pentagram, and consciousness rising out of it. So when you look at that myth, It's just a myth. Most people don't think much about it. It's my job. I break these things down. I read them. I understand them. I try to understand them. But when you apply that to, like, again, mainline politics, mainline news, there was a story in the news that mimicked the story of Osiris in a coffin. That's the story of George Floyd. George Floyd was just a common guy, maybe on the lower end of society, involved in counterfeiting, pornography, drugs, and God knows what else. Doesn't mean he deserved to die. You watch the police cam footage. He's the one that was freaking out. He pushed himself on the ground. You watch the whole context of it. His autopsy says that he died not from somebody kneeing down on his neck, but from a fentanyl overdose and from his heart exploding. That's why he actually died. So once you get past all the arguments and the politics, you realize that the media took a person with dark skin and turned them into a black saint or god, and then they put him in a golden coffin. They literally put him on NBC News. They had the broadcast of it. If you want to look this up, they put him in a golden coffin. So they took a black god and put him into a golden coffin. So that's the kind of thing that you see when you look at mythology and archetypes. This stuff is happening in the real world in the 21st century. Maybe it's a coincidence. And I think coincidence sometimes is a word we use because we don't understand the archetypes and the symbols and the myths that are just naturally there, like a palm tree outside my place here. It's not put there because it means penis, but it is a phallic thing, and you can derive meaning from that. So maybe the story of George Floyd and the golden coffin, maybe that's not put there on purpose, but it's still an archetype and it's still a story that when we understand it, we recognize there's more to the world than just the mundane, on the surface things that we debate and argue about. And that, kind of going back to your first question, is what I do on the Secret Teachings. I try to see how those things relate.
Excellent, man. Now, speaking of symbolism and what's unfolding in the media for us to observe and digest, you have a couple of stories you sent me. One about a demon summoning in Minnesota, and I haven't heard anything about this, but I would sure like to. What's going on here?
Yeah, so there's an art center, and that art center in Minnesota has, it's not really the center itself, but there's an artist who was working at this art center, and they had done some displays there and some displays in New York City. One of the displays they did in New York City was called How to Trap a Demon. And the display that they did at the art center in Minnesota is called Lilith, Lilit, Lilith, the Empathetic Demon. And on the surface, I mean, obviously Christians and conservatives are like, oh my God, this is demonic and this is diabolic and this is evil and these people are going to go to hell. And I mean, I don't like that approach where we immediately write off what's happening. I like to look at the actual story. So I read the story. And I actually found it on a very kind of right-leaning conservative website. And I looked it up for myself. I went to the Art Center website. And what I found was articles and references to the actual event. And then I found the actual event page. And in essence, what it is this artist who, for, I guess, context for this story, believes that they are transgender. And they believe that the goddess or the demon Lilith, which is another name for Lilith, Lilith, Lilith. They believe that Lilith is an empowering goddess, an empowering demon that can help people to see their full potential. And so they invited, and by they, I mean the art center and the they, them, she, they person. They invited people to come to the art center for this demon summoning. And they asked people to create a physical container to trap a demon that is inside of you, something that really gets to you, like maybe you overthink too much. So it's the demon of overthinking, trap that in the vessel. But what I noticed was, because I have a background in demonology, you can actually, I have the Infernal Dictionary here over my left shoulder. You have two components to this. While the people, the families that come, I'm not sure who would bring their family to this, but they're families that come and they create maybe a physical vessel out of something, or maybe they just do it visually. They're like, okay, here's the vessel, and they pretend like they're holding something, or maybe they make something out of wood or clay. I don't know what they did. But while people are making that vessel, and they're supposed to be doing inner work and expressing things and putting those things into this box, the art center and this artist said that Lilith, the demon, would be drawn down from, this is what they actually said, would be drawn down from the moon, the dark side of the moon, and then they would come into your physical body. So I'm reading this, I'm thinking, so people are sitting here with a box and they're thinking about how they can put some of their internal demons into a box, but then the artist is like, no, we're going to bring the demon herself into your physical body. So your body is the box. Your body is the vessel. It's the alchemical container. And while they have people focused on the external, they literally say in the art performance, it's about bringing the actual demon into your physical body. So that's the first layer. The second layer is that the demon Lilith is not an empathetic demon, but they call her empathetic. And the demon Lilith is not a family demon. I mean, you know who Lilith is.
Yeah.
Lilith is the tempter of men. She's the aborter of children, and she's also the destroyer of women. Fundamentally, she destroys families. She has no empathy. And the artist says it's just playful.
Well, let's put together what's been happening for the past decade or so with the introduction of the occult and this transhuman movement. The occult has been thrown out through our media, through Hollywood, and it has permeated everything that we're surrounding ourselves with when it comes to entertainment, whether it's just through symbolism or outright satanic worship, witchcraft, magical practices. This has become such a normalized topic recently, and it is in conjunction with the transhuman movement, the LGBTQ movement, and somehow it's being combined with these movements and growing possibilities when it comes to what we're doing with our technology, artificial intelligence. It's all being kind of interweaving in some strange way, and I want to get your insights into what's happening there.
Yeah, well, I think the best way to sum that up, and I was about to mention this anyway, so it's a good question, is that with this so-called demon summoning, they say it's playful, and they say that it's just a fun little get-together. It's an art show, but it's playful, but it's also very real. So you can't really figure out what's reality and what's not reality when people talk like that.
Yeah.
But the demon Lilith, for those of you who don't know, in the Jewish tradition, Lilith is, in fact, if you look at Michelangelo's painting and a lot of other paintings, you see Lilith or Lucifer in the Garden of Eden is actually the serpent. The serpent is usually half serpent, half female with red hair. So the serpent actually is a female deity, not a male deity. And you see pictures and depictions of that. I actually have a whole section on that in my new book, Garden of Hallucinations here. You can get it at thesecretteachings.info. I have the pictures and kind of show you and break this down. So Lilith, and she goes by other names, Lamash too. She's known as Lamia, which is a vampire, or Galo, which is a vampire. Lilith, if you read a basic encyclopedia, and I'm not saying every encyclopedia says this, but I've got a bunch of encyclopedias, a bunch of symbol books, a bunch of mythology books, and I picked up something recently when I was actually writing this book, something I didn't know. And I was reading about Lilith, and it says she wears jewelry, and one of the pieces of jewelry she wears is a necklace, which is a rainbow. And I thought, oh, that's peculiar, because Lilith is basically a goddess of the underworld.
Yeah.
So in most myths, again, I'm getting to the core of your question. Most myths, the rainbow, as you know, most of your listeners, I assume know, is a covenant that it's a symbol of a covenant God makes with man. The rainbow is also this bridge between heaven and earth. So whether you look at the Scandinavian myths or you look at the Japanese myths, Izanagi and Izanami, the creator deities of Japan, they created the world standing on the rainbow bridge. You find a lot of Norse gods that use the rainbow bridge to come down to the earth. In Native American traditions, that the rainbow is very sacred. But when you invert it, it becomes a bridge or a gateway to the abyss, which is the home of Lilith. And Lilith wears the rainbow. I don't know. Nobody knows exactly why, but we can assume because she is a goddess of the underworld. She is a tempter, and she draws people down into what I call just the abyss. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
So it's weird that a goddess or a demon that wears a rainbow is associated specifically with three different things. She aborts children, she makes women look gross and disgusting, and she hates men. I mean, what do those three things sound like? It's not even a social commentary. It's a demonological and historical commentary. And obviously, what do those three things sound like, right?
It's like they're trying to invoke the age of Lilith through our consciousness, through what they're attempting to put forward with these agendas.
You could say that attempting to invoke the age of Lilith. Mm-hmm. I'd look at it, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I that could actually be a good show name, the Age of Lilith. But I look at it from the point of view of throughout history, when someone was, and I'm not talking about the Salem witch trials. I'm not talking about like the hysteria over demonic possession throughout human history. I think our ancestors were much more understanding, much more sophisticated in their views on these things. If you read the Greek or I think the Egyptians had some of this too, but the Greeks really had a lot of good stuff on demons and what demons really were. There's a lot of magical texts from ancient Greece. And one of the ways in that society, and any other society for that matter, that a demon was defined, especially a female demon, was it was a woman who was unable to give birth to a child, or who was able to give birth but who neglected that child, who didn't take care of them. Because a woman, naturally, no matter what your gender, sex, identity, politics are, a woman has the ability to bring new life into the world. That's just an objective fact. Yeah. So if a woman's unable to do that, then she becomes an inverter of life in a sense. She either breeds death because the child doesn't survive, or she refuses to give birth. She doesn't want anything to do with families or children. Mm-hmm. And that makes her an outsider in a civil society, especially among the Greeks, which were very civilized, relatively speaking. Yeah. So that's where the idea of like this female demon, the Baba Yaga in Slavic lore comes from. That's where the Yamamba in Japan comes from. It's a woman in the woods. It's Hansel and Gretel, the witch. Which, if you read Jordan Peterson points this out, that the witch is actually the mother in Hansel and Gretel. The witch in the woods is not a separate character. She is the mother of the children in another form. So this is again archetypes and symbols, etc. What you learn here is that you have cults throughout history where it's one of two things happening. It's either people that, just by the simple fact that maybe they lost a child in childbirth, that woman starts to be seen as this, she's demonic because she doesn't fit into the confines or the structure of society. That doesn't mean she was treated differently per se, because they're saying a demon killed that child. This woman is possessed by the demon. And maybe that's primitive, but that's kind of the idea. The other side of those things is people that actually saw those demons as characters or entities that they could make a deal with. So they started to do things, and this is really fascinating. In fact, I've got a book here. I should probably show the audience. This is not my book. This is kind of a rarer book. It's called Ancient Magic and Ritual Power. It has nothing at all to do with anything happening today. A lot of these articles and a lot of these essays were written decades ago. But they talk about how a lot of these cults, they would literally try to steal the body parts or the clothing of men to become like men. They would do things they would literally give themselves fake penises. And again, what does all that sound like? So you have women that just can't have a child or choose not to have a child, and they're kind of relegated because outside of the normal social structure, because they're not doing the things that make them biologically a woman and contributing to society. And that's a whole issue that's very complex. That's just how that's how they saw women that couldn't do that or chose not to. But on the other side, you had people that actually worship those goddesses or worship those demons, and that's how they would do it. They would use rainbows. They would dress like men. They would give themselves fake penises. And of course, more than anything, I think is the most relevant outside the rainbow is the fact that they aborted children. So today, I think that these people, at least from a Greek perspective, we could say that those political ideologues are possessed by these demons. This is modern possession. I'm not saying that there's a demon in their body controlling their movements like, Plankton controls SpongeBob's brain and SpongeBob with the little remote control. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that they're possessed by an ideology, and that ideology and the things that they think in an occult sense, that manifests in the astral realm, that bring those thought forms and tulpas and egregores come to life, and that generates the conflict and the chaos that we see in society. So we can blend all these things together. We can look at it from a historical point of view, etc. but we apply it to what's happening today, and you realize, oh, that's kind of scary. This is a lot more occult or a lot more magical.
Yeah, and it's not strictly like a chicken or egg scenario. It's that these energies evolve as humanity has different experiences. But if you look back at culture creation, even going back to just the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, you can see how we have been slowly steered in certain directions to achieve these goals, these alchemical goals of these elite sorcerers. And each generation, they come closer and closer to achieving their perfect utopia, which is this transhuman nightmare which we're approaching right now.
Yeah, which is why a lot of people, rightfully so, refer to that as being transhumanism, that is, as being satanic or as being evil. As a matter of fact, I've talked on my show recently about the fact that in Germany earlier this year, there was a whole church service put together. There's a theologian who helped put it together, but it was 98% generated by artificial intelligence, the sermon, the music. There was also a story in the news just a few days ago. There's August 18th, I think, was the story published date, about how people on Reddit are using ChatGPT to put words into the mouth of Jesus Christ. No. And make him sound as if he's an activist who promotes certain political leftist in particular ideologies, right? So it's like, I'm not a Christian. I'm absolutely not an atheist. I'm not a Christian. I practice Shinto if I have to define myself, but I like symbols. I like learning about it all. There's definitely a force that is in control of everything. And by control, it just is, it's in everything. It's the soul, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. But when I hear that kind of stuff and I see it, I'm like, that's sacrilegious. That is demonic. There's something wrong there with the people and with the actions they're taking. And I want to just add this too, that artificial intelligence is, I don't think it's artificial intelligence in the sense that it's sentient. I refer to it as archonic intelligence. And whatever your audience thinks of archons and all that, there's a lot of interpretations, but archons are the kind of like the demons of the Gnostic Christian sect. And if you listen to Leo Zagami, he has a different interpretation of Gnosticism. I think it's just extremely valid as any other interpretation. But archons, in a sense, are basically unable to create. They can only distort, which is just what Satanism is. They just distort things that are natural. They don't like birth. They like death. They don't like life. They like death, etc., which is what life is. L-I-F-E backwards is evil. It's Twilight language. Evil, E-V-I-L, is backwards for live, L-I-V-E. Even love, E-V-O-L, evil, spelled differently, of course, but it has the same meaning. I talk about that also in my new book. So the idea here is that with artificial intelligence, it's more archonic. It takes things that we've created, right? Music, pictures, videos, and it just puts its own version of it out based on the prompts that it's given.
All creepy looking.
They're all very creepy, and it's really good too. Those systems are really good at making Cthulhu and Lovecraft images more than anything else. So the reason I bring this up is because from a chaotic or satanic definition or point of view, I want people to realize that you don't have to be a Christian to recognize this, or you don't have to be a Muslim. You don't have to be religious at all. But you can start to see that, like if you use a calculator can help you find an answer to a complex problem quicker. And a calculator helps you to find, it's a set answer in mathematics. It's logical. But when you're talking about art, it's the very opposite of that. So this thing's like a parasite, and it's not that it's the AI or the archonic intelligence. It's the people that are using it. It's the people that are being convinced to use it, common people, because it's fun or because it maybe it is helpful. I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying it's the same energy and the same force of Lilith, who aborts children, destroys families, tempts men, and destroys femininity and womanhood. It's the same chaotic force with ChatGPT. It completely destroys an individual's ability to be creative, or it prevents you as a younger person from learning to tap into those creative abilities. All of these things, every single part, it doesn't matter if it's the Lilith story or if it's ChatGPT or it's just basic cult political ideology. All of it is stripping away the power of the individual. And from a Christian point of view, you would definitely see that as satanic or demonic. and you would absolutely see that as void of God or void of source. And my point to all of this is there is not only a way to look at this that isn't religious, but it's a necessity to look at it without any religious background, without any religious preconceived ideas, because if we don't do it like from that perspective and look at it from all angles, we're going to get trapped in the ideological conversations, and we're never going to be able to solve problems or recognize the deeper issues that might exist under the surface of some of these things that we're talking about, if that makes sense.
It does. And I want to get your insights into the possibility that keeps coming up, that I keep looking at, keeps coming across this show. You just mentioned it, that our reality has been hijacked or infiltrated in some way by some, if you'd like to say, archonic force that has a layer of reality that is like an overlay to prevent us from perceiving what is really all around us. This idea keeps resonating with me, and this possibility that there are forces that are affecting our perception of reality. And it does get kind of negative and dark if you think of it in that way, that there's no possible way out. It's like a trapped reality that we keep getting recycled into, and I hate to go to that dark space, but it just makes me wonder what is behind these dark forces, and why do they perpetually infiltrate everything good that we try to put out.
I think that the best way to address that would be to read Carl Jung. And I think that Carl Jung really, I can't even reference a single book where he's specifically talking about that, but I'm saying like the general theme of Carl Jung's work, or the work of Joseph Campbell with archetypes and mythology and trying to understand what all that means, is to recognize that, like Carl Jung said, and this is one of my favorite things he talked about, that UFOs were a modern myth. He said it's a myth and it's a psychic phenomenon. It's something we're manifesting. He said like 98% is something we manifest. So when you just said there that it's almost feels like, our reality has been penetrated and that we are unable to escape and we keep getting recycled and trapped here. Conceptually, I agree with that point of view, and conceptually I agree with like the David Icke point of view. I think it's more than that, because I think that's a modern mythology. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to the pop culture view of the Gnostics, because they believe the same thing, right? And that's where a lot of it comes from. David Icke even references that. So my point is, I think that idea is a modern myth. And I think that if you read Manly Palmer Hall or read Joseph Campbell and many others, those are just two of my favorite authors, you'll start to recognize that it's not so much that we live in a new reality that has been created and hijacked or manipulated by some evil force, some Borg from Star Trek force today or the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. This
is how people have seen reality and life for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. I mean, if you think back to a time when you didn't have grocery stores, if we can do that, you didn't have grocery stores, which are a modern thing within less than 100 years, like the 1920s, 30s, 40s. Grocery stores as we know them today are relatively recent in the last like 50 years. You look back to a time when you didn't have grocery stores, you had to rely on your crops that you were growing, the weather, the elements. Like life was much more difficult in those days. If a crop failed, you died. And you would say and it's not because you're superstitious in the sense that you're ignorant, it's because you are attributing, because you don't understand, you're trying to figure out what's happening in the world. So it's basically science. You're observing the world. The crops failed. You don't maybe know why the crops failed. So a demon maybe destroyed the crops, right? And it's the same. We create those mythos today, those mythologies today. Like we can't figure out why life is so difficult. So it's always Mercury retrograde. I forgot to pay my phone bill, so Mercury's in retrograde. I'm not saying those things.
The energies we put out there are turning into these egregoric forms that manifest in some sort of physical way in our reality.
Well, it's kind of like a Mobius strip. It's kind of like a figure eight. It's like a cycle. It's infinity. And the more energy we put into that, yes, the more it creates, and the more that it falls and folds back onto itself. And so it's like the idea that, if we live in some fake reality, Well, I mean, that's what every mystery school, secret society, any philosopher who's worth their weight has said since the beginning of recorded human history, and we can assume even before. The world's not real. It's Plato's cave. We are spirit and soul. We are something that is beyond the physical. So I think, yeah, a lot of these things are modern mythos. I don't see them as conspiracies or some alien force. But I do think that if you want to approach that subject with any kind of validity, there is a tremendous amount of good, solid, let's call it occult evidence that would suggest that there are powerful people in the world today that are using symbolism, they're using metaphor and myth and archetypes to draw on the energy of those themes to give themselves more power, because they know how those symbols, for example, affect the subconscious of the average everyday person, which is why you see, fast food restaurants and banks and corporations all using essentially the same colors and the same symbols, because they know how it affects the subconscious mind.
Going back to cults and cult leaders, what do you think about the possibility that some of these individuals that start these big followings in what appear to be cults, whether it's paranormal or ufology or political, that some of them may have had a genuine spiritual experience or download or encounter that they can't explain, and were given profound information, but the information was just misinterpreted because of their ego, or they weren't ready to hear it, and then they take off with the information and start a cult or build a certain movement, and that's how these things take off, but they start on a very bad foundation.
Well, right. So I think that, and that's a it's a good, but a very, very complex question, a very good, complex question. And I don't think I'll be able to answer all of it in the time we have. But
that's all right.
In a simple way, this is just my initial thought. I don't have all the answers either, but my initial thought is some people probably are, I can tell you from my firsthand experience that when I was a kid and as I got older and I started writing books and I got into radio, I've seen things physically. I've interacted with things that I can't understand or identify. I don't want to call them demons or aliens or anything like that. But there is something beyond, let's call it. And I've had things that feel like they've been put into my head. I don't know if that's a demon. Probably not a demon. It's probably a part of my higher self, shadow self, whatever you choose to call it, which I guess, is that a demon? Kind of. It is your internal demon. So like those words have to be, I think, really defined and understood for any of these conversations first and foremost. Demon, alien, shadow self and all that. But to answer your question more to the point, what I'm suggesting is, yes, some people I think are really truly in the midst of having or have had an experience where, whether it's the shadow self or it's something else, they have information that it just comes to them. And and a lot of it has to do with how you discuss it and how you define it. Like for me, I almost flunked high school. English was my worst class. I couldn't write an essay. And now I've written, these are just 3 of my 5 books.
Yeah.
So like, to me, that's a spiritual awakening. That's an unveiling of something. I've really awakened, or whatever term you want to use. So that's one way to look at it. But if you look at it from the point of view of like, well, I got a download and I think it was aliens, that starts to sound real silly. And then it makes people like us who are like, well, we just started reading books and we started learning things and now we understand them on another level. That makes us look crazy. It makes you as an audience maybe look crazy. So my point is, depending on how you define it, depending on what words you use, there are plenty of people who have wonderful experiences. The issue is, whether it's because it's intentional or not, the issue is when you try to energetically monetize it. Not necessarily to make money, but when you try to energetically monetize it and package it and sell it, I think that's when it becomes an issue. And, also there are plenty of people who do they infiltrate these communities, like Richard Doty with UFOs, a great example, to spread disinformation. We have a government document on that from the early 50s called the Robertson Panel Report. Type that in, Robertson Panel Report PDF. You can read it online. And then you have people that really are just, as you alluded to, cult leaders, and they literally just use anything and everything to convince people that they're right. Maybe that's based on ego. Maybe it's based on money. Maybe it's based on both and or something else. And they run the cult because they want to be in control of people's minds. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but yes, there's certainly a lot of all of those things happening in every sector of society all the time.
Right on. Now, I want to get into some of the other current events and high impact situations that are unfolding right now. And it's unfortunate, just like we were discussing earlier, that there's so much misinformation out there about some of these current events. But I want to get your insights into some of this, starting with the fires in Maui. Of course, the meme about the directed energy weapons are flowing like water right now, and
Yes,
so are the
they
conspiracies. So we know, obviously, we have no idea what's really going on at this point. We do have great investigators and researchers that are looking into this, and there's evidence that points to some nefarious things that are occurring just below the surface. But as of now, all we know is there's a lot of death and destruction, but there's people out there taking advantage of the situation just to put their own information out there. But I'd like to get not only your insights into what could possibly be going on, but everything that's surrounding that event.
Yes, I'll try to keep it very brief. So I have discussed this twice on air. I did an episode of my show, The Secret Teachings, and I guest hosted Ground Zero Radio right before that. This was last Monday. And I spent a total between the two shows of 5 hours breaking down every angle of the event. So in simple terms, it is extremely suspicious that the same police chief from Las Vegas,
Yeah.
from that shooting is there in Maui. It's also very suspicious, not necessarily indicative of some nefarious thing, but it's very suspicious that the sirens didn't go off or that people... And I've seen a lot of videos about this, and I think it's finally confirmed for sure. In the mainstream even reported on it today that people were blocked from leaving, but we don't really have the context for that too. Like it's an island, so I don't know where people are supposed to go. So there's a lot. There are very suspicious things, but there are also suspicious things about every single event. Like even listeners of your show could look at the video right now, look at my setup here. They could look at my shirt. They could look at the cover of my book. They could look at the books in the background, zoom in, and they could find something to be like, oh, look, that Ryan Gable guy who's on that show, he's a Satanist because he has a book on witchcraft, right? So there's always somebody who can sleuth really hard and they can find proof of something, right? So that's my first thought. So there's always something that can be found that's suspicious, but that shouldn't deter us from recognizing the truly suspicious things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, everything that happens in the world isn't a conspiracy. And I don't know if I need to say that, but I think that should be pretty obvious, right?
Yeah. These days you may need to say it.
But then again, yeah, you're right. These days I might need to say it today. So my concern is that when I first saw the story, I mean, within a few hours, the TikTok, and I don't have TikTok, but the TikTok world exploded. And I know that because people started sending me TikTok videos. And they're like, look at all these suspicious things happening in Hawaii. And I noticed, okay, well, that picture isn't from Hawaii. That video is from another fire in another state. It's not even in Hawaii. People were sharing things that had nothing to do with Hawaii. People were also sharing things that had, they were real photos from Hawaii or real videos, but they were pointing out things that weren't verified, were out of context. And I was like, I don't know if I trust any of those videos. Not saying that you can't find good stuff on TikTok. I'm saying that I just don't know if I trust that any more than I trust the mainstream media. Okay, so that's the second thing. The third thing is the mainstream media kept saying it's all climate change. And I thought, no, I don't think it's climate change. Right. And then I thought, okay, well, what's the alternative? Well, let's go back to TikTok. It's directed energy weapons. I thought, yeah, I don't think it's directed energy weapons. And then the third thing is it's all geoengineering. I thought, man, I don't think it's all geoengineering because what do all three of those things have in common? You think about it, geoengineering, directed energy weapons, and climate change. Humans did all three of them. All three of them. Humans did them. Mother Nature didn't do them. Humans are responsible. And these are three very, I'd say the geoengineering and DEWs are similar, but they're all very distinct. Like one is we breathed too much, so that's why there's fires. The second, or we drove too many cars or whatever. The second one is we have these geoengineering programs, which do exist and which have been operational for a very long time. But the environment and nature is so incredibly complex, just like the human body. You can't exchange virus, vaccine, you'll never be sick. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in the body, doesn't work that way in nature, and the body and nature are also connected. So They're a synced organism, a sympathetic organism. And then the other thing is directed energy weapons. And I've done shows on this before. And I thought in the past the same thing I think today. Directed energy weapons, whether it's Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, etc., or the Department of Defense, or I have a whole folder, government documents, government reports, military reports, where they talk about DEWs. I mean, hell, there was even a conference on DEWs in Washington a few years ago. I think it was like 2018 or something, some big event. There's like an agency or a group that literally promotes education about directed energy weapons. It's a real thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what is a DEW? They're electromagnetic. They disable missiles. Vigilant Eagle, I think, was one of the programs, Vigilant Eagle. They also use them for crowd dispersal, which I've come face to face with at protests long time ago. The active denial systems, they make you feel like basically you're in a microwave. They're not typically or ever used to start fires. Doesn't mean that that's not a thing that couldn't happen, but it just doesn't seem like it's the most logical explanation. Neither does geoengineering, neither does climate change. Again, all three have one thing in common. They're all made by man.
Yes.
So that's the third point, right? And now the fourth point, my final point here is expanding on the issue. There's more to the issue than just those arguments. In the United States of America this year, according to federal data, I know people say, well, the federal data is manipulated. It's like, okay, well, let's just look at the context of that federal data going back decades. No data, no statistic has all the details. None of it has all the points. None of it has everything we need to know. Yes, data can absolutely be taken out of context and manipulated. Look what happened with COVID-19 case and death statistics, the difference between dying with a virus or from a virus, or the difference between testing for a virus or testing for antibodies. Huge difference with all these things. So yes, statistics aren't always reliable in that sense. It's not a conspiracy because you can't get all the data in one chart, right? So point is, federal data shows there are 33,700 fires burning in the United States this year. It's a lot of fires.
Yeah.
Most of them are remote. Most of them are nowhere near civilization as we know it, right? So we don't care about those fires.
Right.
So that brings up an interesting philosophical question. It's really a matter of if it affects us, then it's an issue. If it's Paradise, California, it's an issue. If it's Maui, it's an issue. If it's some forest somewhere we've never been to, then it's not an issue. Or if it's another country. I mean, anybody give a damn about the earthquake in Turkey? Anybody give a damn about the typhoon hitting Japan this week or last week? Anybody care about the massive, unbelievably destructive flooding in Beijing? Exactly. Most people don't even know about it. Nobody cares. Were those things direct energy weapons, right? So when you think about this, it's like there are 33,700 fires. That's a lot of fires. People have been, this is like a side conspiracy theory to the Maui story. People have been saying, well, all these fires are suspicious. And it's like, okay, since when does the average person care about wildfires? You looked up a statistic and now all of them are suspicious. So my point is, those statistics for 33,700 fires this year are actually below the 10-year average. As the environmentalist Bjorn Lomborg points out, and I don't know Bjorn, but he has amazing books. He points out, and he just wrote a New York Times op-ed recently, that there are less fires, they burn less acres than at any point in the last 100 years. In fact, the most fires, the most acreage burned, even the most heat waves, they all go back to the 1930s. Yeah. It's not today. So I guess my point being, to summarize, there are a lot of fires, yes. If you don't have the context for it, you have no idea. It's probably not a DEW, climate change, or some global geoengineering program. It's natural. When it affects us, that's when it becomes a problem. That doesn't mean, even if those fires started because someone was smoking and flicked their cigarette or lit fireworks, or the power lines, which now the Washington Post reported this morning that Maui Utility has covered up evidence of the lack of maintenance or something like that on the lines, which also Pacific Gas and Electric They
Yeah.
pled guilty to manslaughter in California because of that. So
Right.
those are human issues that we don't want to fix because of political problems or money problems. If those created the fires, it doesn't really matter what created them. The end result can be the same. Yes, people can go buy the land. Yes,
Yeah.
corporations can get in it. This is what the U.S. did with Japan when we dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So those are my points. Those are my thoughts. I'm sorry to ramble on.
No, those are great points, and I think that I'm so glad you said it, because people have to consider all angles, or as many as possible, before they come out and just have some nonsense that just because they believe something or heard it from somewhere on TikTok. So it's very important. And what I want to get to now is something else that is in the current events and could possibly be causing a level of fear in some individuals, is the possibility of new lockdowns or variants of COVID-19. And personally, I don't think that it would have the same or even close to the same reaction as desired or as it had before. I don't see people giving up their livelihood again for this, but what are your thoughts on what's happening with this?
My thoughts are symbolic thoughts. And what I mean by that is, beyond the masking and the social distancing, all of that, when you look at the names of the new variants, I think it's psychological, and the evidence of psychological warfare, for lack of a better word, or psychological manipulation is beyond question. I give you the example of these new variants. There are three of them. One is called Eris, or Eris, E-R-I-S. The other is called Pyrola, or P-Rola, and the third one is called Pi. So Eris, or Uris, very simple to look up that name. It's a Greek goddess of discord and strife. The mythology of Eris is that she goes to a wedding she wasn't invited to, so she's upset she wasn't invited. And she throws down a golden apple, and the golden apple has written on it something to the effect of, to the fairest. So everybody wants to be the fairest. Everybody wants, whatever the apple represents. So people start fighting over it at this joyous wedding event. And that is essentially what the new COVID variants are. They're like the golden apple of Eris. People just start fighting immediately. They don't even have to bring them back. It's just like the idea, and people start arguing about it. So that's the first variant. The second and third variant, Pyrola or P-Rola and Pi, those struck me as very interesting, because I thought pi, like, okay, it's, like Greek, like 3.14, like pi. And then I was like, well, what does pyrola mean? So I looked it up, and it's Galician, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's an older language. I think it's like northwestern Spain, but that's where the word comes from. It means penis. No, jumping around, the issue. It literally just means penis.
Yeah.
So you have a variant that means penis. And then pi is obviously a very derogatory euphemism for the vagina, but pi is also, if you spell it P-I-E, like a piece of pie, it's just Twilight language. It means the same, like evil, E-V-I-L, or E-F-O-L, evil, love, life, live, or not E-F-O-L, E-V-I-L, or E-V-O-L, live and love. That's what I meant. So regardless of how you spell it, it still has the same meaning. So pi, P-I-E, is also, I didn't know this, like in an Urban Dictionary or just any kind of like talk online, PIE is like a euphemism for sex. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
So Pirola literally means penis. Pi is a euphemism for vagina, or PIE is a euphemism for sex. So you have three variants. You have a goddess of discord and destruction, just like Lilith, we talked about at the beginning of the show, who destroys, who distorts, who manipulates. That's literally what Eris does. And then you have these two other variants. You have Pyrola and you have Pi, which is penis and vagina. So that's alchemy. That's the bringing and the merging together of the male and female, the fire and water. It's an alchemical process. And I want to reference something. I don't know if your listeners, I assume you saw Barbie and Oppenheimer.
I did not see either one. I've been a little too bad. I haven't been going to theaters in at least a couple of years. I've been so disappointed with movies lately that I've just kind of checked out of all that type of Hollywood entertainment. Every once in a while, I'll go and watch something or find something on my Fire Stick. But no, I really haven't been watching movies lately, and I used to enjoy them so much. But there's just been a drop in the level of quality based on my perception.
Yeah, I mean, I went to film school, and I feel the same way. Yeah, I can't really. I like to go just to go because it's something to do. But yeah, most movies aren't any good anymore. But yes, just if you haven't seen it, I guess that doesn't really matter. But I'll send you the pictures of this.
Yeah, I don't mind spoilers if whatever you got.
No,
yeah.
no, there's no spoilers. It's just something I haven't heard anybody else point this out. There's a scene in Oppenheimer, and this has to do with the variants. And there's a scene in Barbie that really got my attention. Has nothing to do with the politics of it, the history of it, the quality of the movie. It has to do with symbols. In Oppenheimer, when Robert Oppenheimer is he's at a blackboard and he's drawing out how the Manhattan Project can be compartmentalized to Leslie Groves. He draws the different parts of the country. So like, the Hanford lab, the Los Alamos lab, etc. And he connects them with an X, and then he draws a circle. And the circle in the middle of the X is where the nexus point of all the labs converge. That's the point of the Manhattan Project. And the point is having this nuclear reaction, creating the bomb. So the bomb is taking the natural world, if you will, the base elements, if you will, atomic things. And you're trying to, it's fusion or fission. There's two different kinds. And then you're transforming that into the power of the sun. So you have base elements to the power of the sun. That is in and of itself alchemy. And so in Oppenheimer, when you see that X with the circle through it, and at the points of the X, you have the names of the laboratories. Not only is that alchemical, that's actually a magical talisman, and not by some stretch of the imagination. I actually came home, and after I saw that, and I thought, where did I see that? So I picked up my Occult Arcana book, and I'm like looking through. I'm like, I know I have that in my book somewhere. It's a big book, so like I can't remember where it was. Where was that in the book? Yeah. But I was flipping through the book, and then I realized I found it. That's a sigil for the planet Jupiter, and it's not just a sigil for the planet Jupiter. In fact, I'll reference the book because I just opened to it here. It's not just a sigil for the planet Jupiter. It's one of the 7 pentacles consecrated to Jupiter, the X with the circle, and this is what it means. Where it's used in a talisman to defend against other people, other magicians, other people invoking spirits, or to protect yourself against things that you're invoking. And what was the U.S. invoking? They were invoking the power of God, the power of the universe. The Germans were doing the same thing. It was a battle between, who could get the bomb first. And a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the scientists at Los Alamos in particular, but on the Manhattan Project in general, most of the top scientists were all Jewish, because Hitler didn't want Jewish scientists. We used mostly Jewish scientists, including Oppenheimer himself. And in the Jewish tradition, Jewish mystical tradition, you have the golem, and that fits into this as well. The golem, which is base material, and you create this life out of it. You write the word truth, and then you erase part of it in Hebrew, and then that kills the golem. So when you think about it from that point of view, they used the sigil. I don't know if it was an accident. It might have been just an accident. Like that palm tree outside. It's a phallic symbol. Wasn't planted there to look like a penis. Maybe it was just that. Maybe Cillian Murphy just went up to the board and Nolan said, "Here, draw this," and he just drew. And so it might not have any meaning, but subconsciously it does have that meaning, and it relates to the underlying symbolic theme of the Oppenheimer movie. So you find that in Oppenheimer. When you start to build these patterns, though, you start to realize it's not just a coincidence, because when you go to see Barbie, which was billed next to Oppenheimer, people went to see Barbie and then Oppenheimer or vice versa. You go see Barbie, and it's like, not only is the sigil of the planet Saturn in the movie, it's also the moment when Barbie says, or when Margot Robbie says, "You guys ever think about dying? You ever think about death?" Well, what is Saturn? Saturn is the god of death. I mean, the god of life too, because he is, part of the cyclical nature. He holds the scythe. He's Father Time, the Grim Reaper. But so Margot Robbie is standing on a circle with a dot, which is an alchemical symbol for the sun. Sometimes they refer to to Saturn as the black sun. And as she's standing on that symbol, which is also the planet Saturn turned on its side like an eyeball, she says, "You ever think about death?" And then the scene transitions, and it's very quick. It transitions, so they overlay the circle with the dot with a disco ball. So the circle is around a disco ball, and the disco ball is rotating. So it literally looks like the planet Saturn with rings. And so what is that a symbol of? Well, the sigil of Saturn, it's the opposite of Oppenheimer and alchemy. It's de-alchemical transmutation. It's taking
Huh.
gold, the symbol of the sun, and turning it into Saturn, which they literally physically did in the movie. And Saturn's metal is lead. So they take gold and turn it into lead in Barbie. So you mix these two movies together, and just like pyrola and just like pi, it's another alchemical ritual. So whether you see that in movies or in the news about COVID-19, this powerful archetypical symbolism and occult, it's not evil, but it can be used for those things, nefarious purposes, of course. It's everywhere. And that's what I do.
And it just makes me wonder, is this the way of seeing the code behind what existence is? Some sort of cosmic algorithm? It's pretty crazy, man.
Like the code in the Matrix. It feels like that. It's not necessarily nefarious. It's just like that's how reality works.
That's how all these strange things connect, these synchronicities. Now let's close on this. Let's talk about what you see with the symbolism behind the UFO congressional hearing, what's happening with the admittance of the possibility of non-human biologics and crash retrievals and everything that's coming out of the media and our government right now.
So I haven't actually followed that as closely as a lot of people have. I have certainly paid attention to it, and I did a couple of shows. The last UFO show I did, actually, other than with Ryder Lee recently, was probably was whenever that sighting of the aliens in Vegas happened. It was a couple of months ago. So I talked about that and talked about the David Grush story. My initial thoughts and my thoughts that remain in line with my initial thoughts today are that David Grush is either really, really, really good at acting, which I don't think that's what it is. That's what some people say. It's just a plant. He's just an actor. I don't think that's what it is. My initial thought was that, but I don't think that now. But what I do think David Grush is he's like an actor. I think he's a useful idiot. And I think that the guy has been used by intelligence agencies to pump out disinformation. He's like a modern day Richard Doty, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And that really, in essence, that really sums up what I think about it, to be honest with you, because I don't trust, I don't see how anybody can trust 75 years of disinfo with lots of documents where the government has said, well, we're going to have UFO groups infiltrated. We're going to have, movies made about UFOs to discredit people. It's a real phenomenon. We're not sure what it is either, but we need to discredit people from looking into it because we think it could be very powerful. We think it could, maybe it's used we could use it for the military or whatever the case is. So we got to keep the public from investigating that kind of stuff, infiltrate UFO groups, etc. I think this is just a modern version of that. And I don't know how anybody that doesn't trust the government for 75 years suddenly starts to trust them, right? When their echo chamber begins to resonate with what they want to hear. And that's kind of like the same problem we talked about at the beginning with political cults and stuff like that.
Well, either way, it's interesting, and it looks like it's probably an excuse to roll out new technology, toys, and ways to keep us in line and in fear in some ways.
A lot of people reference Carol Rosen, who supposedly worked with von Braun. And I think she's misquoted probably more than anybody else who ever referenced anything about aliens. The actual statement she made was that there would be not a fake alien invasion, but that the threat of extraterrestrials would be fake, right? Right. So there's a huge difference between a fake alien invasion and the threat of alien.
Yeah,
I think
I'd love to take that and run with it.
Oh yes, and I think that's, if there's anything going on, I'm not saying that the government's preparing to say, hey, aliens are here and they're a threat. It's the building of the idea in the public mind. The military, after 75 years, still can't outmaneuver these craft. At least that's the idea. They're still super advanced. Our technology can't compete with them. So it kind of builds and creates this golem or this egregore or thought form in the public mind. And it's this idea that, this keeps happening. The government's finally admitting it. It's all over the place. I've seen one myself, people say. It kind of builds the idea of what she was alluding to, that maybe the threat is fake. Not saying aliens don't exist, but the threat or whatever the government's doing is fake. Right.
Ryan, before you head out, you got a new book out. Tell us a little bit about it and how they can get our hands on it.
Yes, the Garden of Hallucinations book. This is the book right here. So I wrote this book, Occult Arcana, It's a very, very thick book. And I wanted to write something that wasn't so giant, wasn't so heavy, but also combined some, it's new stuff, new material, but combines some of the most important elements of this occult arcana book into a new book that's a lot thinner, a lot easier to carry, a little cheaper. So I wrote Garden of Hallucinations. In simple terms, we break it down into 4 parts. The first part is all about twilight language, which references things like when you get up in the morning, you're getting up in the morning, like those words have different meanings, but when they're used in ways that could be interpreted as magical, you start to recognize that our language, and especially the English language, can be utilized or perhaps was crafted or perhaps was manipulated to have these deeper meanings. So like you get up in the morning and you're mourning because you're alive. You go to a job. The origin of the word job references suffering or crying. You have, maybe an earn to do something different, or you go to work to earn, you know what an earn is. What do you do in the morning? You also awake. What do you do at a funeral? It's awake. So we look at things like that. Also the Hollywood broadcasting, the Hollywood of the Druidic magicians, stuff like that. Stuff you've heard Jordan Maxwell talk about, but in much more detail. The second part of the book goes into what I call the Garden of Hallucinations. And that looks at altered states of consciousness, shamanism, and UFOs. And it looks at the similarities between those things. But it focuses specifically on the Garden of Eden archetype and the transition between the base of the human spine, which is the fruit of desire in the Garden of Eden, up the spine into the head, which is Golgotha, the skull. And that's where we are resurrected or born again, the 2 hemispheres of the brain inside the temple. That's the 2 thieves of contradiction that Christ was crucified in between. So you see that the whole idea of in theology and religion, et cetera, it can really be expressed in the human body itself and in nature. And then the last 2 sections of the book, the third section details more like sacred texts from the Bhagavad Gita to the Zend-Avesta, Upanishad, the Bible, the Quran, similarities and parallels. And I kind of try to break down the difference between magic and miracle. And then last but not least, the last section sort of takes you into the real key of the secret teachings in the mystery schools. And it all has to do with symbolism and archetypes and mythology. And so that's the book, Garden of Hallucinations. It is available at www.thesecretteachings.info.
Excellent. Ryan, thank you so much. Fantastic conversation. We'll definitely do it again soon. And until next time. What's that?
As a with video.
With video, we'll do a video, of course. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.